everyone, Effie here. Today I'm going to show you how I made these cards using our Blizzard Hugs stamp set. So I'll be doing some heat embossing and some watercoloring. So I'm going to start off by brushing on some anti-static powder onto my watercolor paper panel, and then I'm going to stamp the two smaller snowflakes in the set with some clear embossing ink all over my panel. After I stamp the panel with some of the larger stamps, I'm going to pour on some white embossing powder and hit the panel with my heat tool. This way I can see exactly where I've stamped and embossed. At this point, I want to fill in some of the negative areas with the smaller snowflake stamps. So I brushed on some more anti-static powder, stamped the smaller snowflake stamps, poured on the embossing powder, and I kind of just repeated this process until all of the negative areas were filled in with snowflakes. Once I was satisfied with the amount of coverage, I hit the whole panel with my heat tool, and now I'm going to get ready for some watercoloring. I want a nice blended watercolor washed look, so I started by spraying the entire panel with some clean water from a spray bottle. And then I just started dropping in a little bit of color burst pigment in Orchid into the centers of my snowflakes, because with the Blizzard Hugs you have that open area of the inside of the snowflake. So that's what makes this design really unique and really cool to work with. So once I've dropped in a little bit of Orchid color burst, I'm going to add some Indigo color burst and blend the colors together. And I'm just going to do that as I fill the entire panel, but I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of white space, or that white space of the paper, visible. So I'm basically using that negative space to add an additional color, for example white, to the color palette of this project. So my project is a combination of the Orchid, Indigo, and a little bit of white, and this is going to create a little bit of a dreamy look, and I'm going to continue just blending or dropping in pigment and blending that pigment into each other. And to make sure that I get a really nice blend between the colors, I go back to spray some additional water to keep the panel wet. Once I'm finished painting, I'm going to expedite the drying process of my panel by hitting it with my heat tool, and then I'll take the largest die from our double stitched rectangles large die collection to die cut my watercolor paper into an A2 size panel with stitching at the edges. And then I created my sentiment strip, and basically I white heat embossed the sentiment onto some heavyweight vellum. So I made sure to prep the vellum with some anti-static powder. I stamped the sentiment, and then I poured some white heat embossing powder onto the vellum. After I melted that powder, I just trimmed that sentiment panel into a fishtail banner. Next, I'm going to get ready to mount my watercolored panel onto a side folding A2 card base using strips of our double-sided adhesive. I made a mistake here. I should have attached the sentiment banner onto the watercolor panel before I mounted it onto the base. So I kind of just peeled it up and stapled the vellum strip with a tiny attacher, and then I added some of our round gems to finish off my card. The gems added a lovely touch of bling to the project, and I really like this project so much that I made a second one using the largest snowflake stamp from the same Blizzard Hugs set. So I'm just going to show you quickly how I made the second card. I basically applied the same technique, I just use a different color scheme. So after I stamped my entire watercolor panel with the largest snowflake stamp and some of the smaller ones, I just repeated the process of wetting the panel and dropping in a little bit of fuchsia pigment and orchid and indigo color bursts. And I forgot to mention this earlier in the video, but to help move the pigment a little bit more naturally than using the brush, I made sure that my panel had enough moisture on it where if I move the panel side to side and up and down, the pigment would flow naturally with the water that's already on the panel. So you can move the pigment around that way, or you can use the assistance of a water brush or a paintbrush that you have. So that's how I made the second card. I hope you enjoyed today's projects and videos. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel because I update on a weekly basis. As always, thanks so much for stopping by and watching. I'll see you next time.